Welcome to Deep in the Crypt, a channel dedicated to the paranormal, the strange, and the supernatural. If you like the video, please repeatedly bash the like button and subscribe to the channel. And now, it's time to go deep in the crypt. Today's story has a military backdrop and involves the tragic deaths of not one, but three people in separate but closely connected incidents. This story is not only terrifying, but it is also so unbelievably sad and tragic that it would make Shakespeare cry. Now that you've been warned, get ready for the tale of the White Lady of Kinsale. This story takes place in County Cork, specifically in Kinsale Harbour. County Cork is found on the southwest of Ireland and is known for its beautiful and dramatic coastline and scenery. Cork City, the second city in Ireland, and Blarney Castle, where you can kiss the world-famous Blarney Stone and receive the gift of eloquence. Kinsale Harbour. The events that would give rise to the legend of the White Lady of Kinsale take place at Charles Fort, at the entrance to Kinsale Harbour. In centuries past, the town of Kinsale was very important from a strategic, military and trading standpoint. It was here that the British won the Battle of Kinsale in 1601 against an allied force of native Irish and a Spanish fleet. This is usually called the Siege of Kinsale. It was such a key event in Irish history that losing this battle resulted in the untimely end of Gaelic laws and Gaelic lifestyle throughout Ireland. It paved the way for the flight of the Earls in 1607, and shortly after this, the plantation of Ulster. After winning this battle, the British set about strengthening the defences around Kinsale Harbour. They built James Fort in 1602, and they followed this up with a second fort built on the opposite side of the harbour in 1678. This was called Charles Fort, and sometimes called the New Fort. Both forts have an unusual star-shaped design for the walls, which was believed to better withstand cannon fire from attacking vessels, as the cannonballs would strike the walls diagonally instead of directly head-on. Charles Fort was burnt down in the Irish Civil War in 1922, but it remains one of the largest and most impressive military forts in Ireland. A tragic wedding day. Our story takes place sometime in the late 1600s, when the fort was in full use as a British Army garrison. The daughter of the commanding officer, Colonel Warrender, had just been married to a young soldier called Trevor Ashford. The woman's real name is unknown, but for the purpose of the story, we'll call her Kate. The wedding, a small affair, took place in the fort, and after a reception and celebration, the happy couple decided to take
a romantic walk
along the cliffs outside the fort. As the sun was setting, the bride looked down on the cliffs and admired the beautiful flowers she saw growing there. Trevor told his wife that he would go down on the cliffs and pick the flowers for her, but she stopped him, saying he would get his wedding outfit all dirty and messed up. So Trevor decided to ask the sentry who was on duty to run down, pick the flowers and bring them back up to him. The sentry agreed. However, as he was keeping watch for the fort, he insisted that Trevor take his place in the watchtower. As it was getting cold, Trevor told his wife to go inside to the reception and he would follow her in shortly. So as the young sentry ran down to fetch the flowers, Trevor pulled on the sentry's coat and climbed into the watchtower. Now the sentry took longer than expected, and Trevor, sitting in the watchtower, soon felt a wave of exhaustion overtake him. The day's events and festivities had taken their toll on the poor bridegroom. Perhaps he wanted to regain some strength for his first night as a married man, that's all I'll say. But Trevor laid back, placed his cap over his head, and closed his eyes. Punishment. Now, it just so happened that Colonel Warrender was out on the cliffs looking for the newlywed couple. He came across the sentry's watchtower and he decided he would ask the sentry if he had seen his daughter. When he stepped inside, he could not believe what he was seeing. The sentry asleep at his post. Now consider that in wartime Britain, falling asleep on your watch carried an instant penalty of death. The fate and lives of the entire garrison were put at risk by an unreliable sentry who fell asleep on watch. The colonel had a duty to protect the lives of his men, but he also felt a strong sense of fatherly protection for his daughter and her new husband. Of course, what he didn't realize was that this sleeping sentry was in fact his daughter's husband. Without hesitation, he drew out his revolver, aimed it at the sleeping man's chest, and summarily executed him for his crime. Inside the fort, the colonel's daughter heard the gunshot and immediately sensed something was wrong. She frantically ran outside and saw her father emerging from the watchtower. When she reached her father, he calmly explained that he found the sentry asleep on watch and had delivered his due punishment. His daughter was immediately filled with dread. She ran past him and into the watchtower, where her fears were confirmed. Her husband lay dead on the floor. Kate Warrender, after being married for only a few hours, was now a widow. A triple tragedy. The devastated bride wept over Trevor's dead body. Her father, when he realized what he had just done, was shocked, horrified. He tried desperately to console his daughter. He tried to apologize, but really, what can you say in a situation like this? Kate was beside herself. Her father had just killed the man she loved, the man she had married. Overcome with grief and loss and heartbreak, she fled. She ran in her wedding dress straight to the ramparts of the fort overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. Without a moment's thought or a pause to collect herself, she threw herself off and was killed on the rocks below. Aftermath. It's almost inconceivable to think about what the colonel was feeling after learning his daughter had taken her life. It must have been a combination of overwhelming grief and sadness, but also unbelievable guilt and shame. To know that his very actions had led to all of this, I mean, there are no words. Devastated would be an absolute understatement. And, it has to be said, but humiliation really, for making such a mistake. In any case, the poor old colonel was unable to cope with what had happened, and 3 days later took his own life with the same revolver that had killed Trevor, completing the tragedy. The White Lady. Since these fateful and utterly tragic events, the ghost of Kate Warrender has been seen wandering not only the Charles Fort, but also the fishing village of Kinsale itself. It is said that the ghost, still wearing her wedding dress, is searching for her husband. There have been dozens, if not hundreds, of sightings of the ghost of the White Lady over the centuries. The following are some very credible witness accounts. Major Black. In 1815, Major Black, a veteran of the Peninsula Wars, saw a strange lady, whom he didn't recognize, enter the fort and walk upstairs. He noticed that she was wearing a peculiar, old-fashioned white dress. He quickly followed her up the stairs and watched as she walked into one of the rooms. When he entered the room, there was no sign of her. Captain Hull. One night in the 1870s, a Captain Marvin Hull and a Lieutenant Hartland were walking upstairs to their respective bedrooms. When they reached the landing, they saw a woman in a white dress. They stood there, awestruck and silent. She turned and looked toward them, showing a beautiful face, but colorless as a corpse. She then turned and walked through a locked door, and was not seen again for several years. The Carpenter. In the early 1900s, a local Kinsale girl recounted the story of her grandfather, who worked as a carpenter at the fort many years before. He saw a strange lady walking past him, dressed in white. She looked odd because she was wearing a white dress that was very old-fashioned and antique. Shortly after seeing the White Lady, he fell ill and never returned to work. He died some days later. Here we see the White Lady acting almost like a banshee, a foreteller of death. The Stairs. There are also at least 2 separate accounts of soldiers being flung down the stairs by an unseen force. They were thrown with such violence that they were knocked out and were found lying unconscious at the bottom. Could this be the wrathful spirit of Kate Warrender exacting vengeance on the military men and their cruel laws and sense of justice that took the life of her beloved husband? Sightings involving children. The White Lady has often been sighted by children who were living with their parents at the fort. In one account, 2 sergeants were packing up equipment, and a child who was nearby asked them, "Who is the lady in the white dress?" The child pointed to where she saw the lady, who she said was smiling at her. The 2 men, who could see nobody there, immediately dropped their things and ran out of the room in terror. Another time, a nurse who was working at the garrison saw the ghost of the young maiden leaning over a sleeping child. Interlaced fingers. A very interesting account comes from a jogger who was running past Charles Fort. He stopped to catch his breath and admire the scenery. Then he placed his hand on the wall of the fort to stretch. Out of nowhere he felt fingers interlacing with his, and he jumped back astonished. He looked around and there was no one to be seen. He said the fingers had come out from the wall he placed his hand on. Could this be Kate Warrender's ghost reaching out from beyond the grave in a desperate attempt for connection and to regain the love that she so tragically lost? Room 7. Other sightings have been reported in the local hotel, which has been aptly named the White Lady. She has been sighted many times in the infamous Room 7 of the hotel. Apparently, she puts in an appearance every 2 or 3 weeks. The owner of the hotel has seen her twice around New Year's. One time she was seen making toast in the kitchen. Strange, because a toaster would have been an unfamiliar device to the young Kate Warrender. So, a ghost with a sense of curiosity and a penchant for modern devices and a taste for toast. One Kinsale resident says she has definitely not seen the ghost of the White Lady, but she has seen the ghost of her poor father, Colonel Warrender, sitting in the fort wearing military gear and sobbing quietly. So that's it for today, lads. What did you think of this tragic story? Can you imagine how the old colonel felt after executing his son-in-law by mistake? And what about his daughter who lost her husband on her wedding day in such tragic circumstances? And do you believe the ghost of the White Lady walks the ruins of the fort to this day? Would you stay at the White Lady Hotel? And would you be brave enough to sleep in room 7? Personally, I think that would be too much for me. But I do want to say thanks for watching. Now please repeatedly bash the like button and subscribe for more videos like this. And remember, stay scary. His daughter was to be married. Her name was Willful Warren. Her name was Willful Warrender. Willful Kate. Her name was Kate.